4 of these things go in a row. Not on city council, Mark, on regional committees.
Sure.
We buffering.
You are live.
Okay, let's call to order the Dougherty Valley Geologic Hazard Abatement District meeting of April 27th. Before roll call, the city attorney has an announcement.
Thank you. The procedures adopted for this meeting exceed or meet the standards set forth in Governor Newsom's Order N-25-20, allowing public meetings like this one to be held by teleconference to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. Madam Clerk, please conduct roll call, and I'll ask the mayor to recognize me afterward.
Board Member Armstrong,
Here.
Board Member Veros,
Here.
Board Member Zafar,
Here.
Vice Chair Perkins,
Here.
Chair Hudson.
Here, we recognize the city attorney.
Thank you. Based on the responses to the roll call, the record should reflect that all board members can hear the proceedings clearly. And if there are no objections, the record will further reflect that each board member believes, based on facial recognition or voice recognition or otherwise, that everyone representing themselves to be board members are in fact board members. And seeing no
Yes.
objection, back to you, Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
with the reminder that all votes must be taken by roll call.
Okay, Madam Clerk, are there any announcements?
No.
Seeing none, public comment is now open. Members of the audience are encouraged to address the Dougherty Valley Geologic Hazard Abatement District on any non-agenda item. Members of the public who are participating via Zoom will have the opportunity to make comments to the board live through the Zoom application. Comments from the public under public comment may also be submitted by email to cityclerk@sanramon.ca.gov. No board action can be taken at this meeting on issues raised during public comment, whether submitted by email or Zoom. If you wish to speak under public comment on this item, please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom or dial *9 on your telephone. When it is your turn to talk, you will be called upon by name if provided. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person, and a clock will be running on the Zoom screen. Oh, we're down to 14, but we do have 2 attendees, and there are 2 attendees from the last one. Is there anyone wishing to speak under public comment? Seeing none, we will close the public comment and get on to approval of the minutes for the regular meeting of January 12th. Do I have a motion?
I can move.
Okay, we have a motion from Zephyr. I think that raising of the hand was a second from Perkins.
Yes.
Any comments or further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, roll call vote, please.
Board Member Armstrong,
You know, I got sworn in that night just after this meeting, although I attended the meeting. So I'm going to abstain again.
Go ahead, next.
Board Member Veros.
Yes.
Thank you. Board Member Zafar,
Yes.
Vice Chair Perkins,
Yes.
and Chair Hudson.
Yes, 401. And we are on to no consent calendar, no unfinished business, new business, another Bartlett special resolution DV GAD number 2021-04. We went from 1 to 4. That's the Dougherty, oh no, that was a different one. That's Dougherty Valley Geologic Hazard Abatement District. The approval of the fiscal year 2021-2022 engineer report and updated reserve fund study. And Mr. Bartlett, do you have a staff report on this one?
I do indeed. Thank you. I will share my screen. Oh.
Now try it again. Sorry.
All right. There we go. So as with the other GAD, this is the area that we are talking about as outlined in the orange border. I just like to point out that the Dougherty Valley GAD is a little bit more than the Dougherty Valley. It also includes the West Branch area to the north and the Old Ranch Summit area on the south. And it does actually include a small area within the political boundary that goes down to Camino Ta Sahara. As with the Northwest San Ramon GAD, the Dougherty Valley GAD's mission is to prevent geologic hazards through monitoring and maintenance, repair hazards where they occur, be a good steward of the land, and maintain an appropriate fund balance to allow for those activities. One thing I'd like to point out while I have this image up is that there's two different shades shown here. The lighter colored area is the land that is already owned by the district, and the dark colored area is still owned by the developer. The Toll Brothers, which is the owner of the vast majority of this area in here, has requested that the GAD take acceptance of this area, and we're in the process of reviewing that request, looking at conditions on the ground, making sure that there's nothing that needs to be taken care of prior to acceptance. And we expect that acceptance to occur later this year or early next fiscal year. So the key issues that are coming up, 2021 has actually been a light rain year, which almost always means a light maintenance year. So from the financial standpoint, that's very good for the reserve fund study. Of course, it's been extremely dry, so we have a heightened fire awareness and may be undertaking additional fuel abatement activities this spring and early summer. As most of you are aware, there was a large landslide 2 years ago, which cost approximately $5 million to repair. That work has been essentially completed. There is a little bit of ongoing activity that staff is undertaking with regard to the private properties that were adjacent to that landslide. We've done some minor repair fencing. We've worked with a couple of property owners with regard to repairs that they had undertaken and that we verified were related to the landslide. And we're still talking to a couple of the property owners out there.
Robin,
Yes.
have we looked at, do you have a chart or something that says that this is the amount of rain we got here in San Ramon, and this is the amount of repairs we conducted in that year, that rain year? I'd like to see
I
that.
charted that up a few years ago, and there is a general kind of correlation. And so I can update that and send it to you via a weekly update.
That would be great. Yeah, because my recollection was that it was a delayed effect, that rain had a delayed effect on some of our repairs. But I'd like you to update that chart and tell us what you have for that.
Yes, I can certainly do that.
Thank you.
The remaining work, there's a little bit of environmental enhancement that we'd like to do out in the areas that were impacted by that landslide, most specifically the area where we placed fill. We'd wanted to do some improvements in that area, and while we did undertake them, really not a lot has established itself due to the following winter being so light. So there's probably a little bit of additional enhancement we'll do, including some signage where the trail got rerouted. Other than that, the other main feature of this year's report is that anticipation that we'll be taking all remaining open space. This is the proposed budget for fiscal year 22. It's not dissimilar from what you've seen in previous years. I have broken down the some monitoring costs separate from repairs and maintenance. Again, I anticipate that a lot of this funds that are in this slope stabilization and maintenance item here will be unused this year and will return to the reserve fund, which is a common feature for this GAD. We budget a considerable number of dollars under maintenance and repair so that if an event happens, we can respond immediately without returning to the GAD board for additional appropriations. But again, it usually results in quite a lot of money returning to the reserve. With that, we always do this curve where we try and project where we see the reserve fund going. This is a little bit more complicated this year. This red line was established in 2003 with our reserve fund study as what the general trajectory we wanted to see. The black line was what was the then assumed growth in the fund, which incorporated a approximately $1 million landslide repair occurring every year. What actually happened is that we were really running above this. And then right when we thought everything was great, we had a $5 million landslide occur, which is shown on this darker blue line here. And then that then projected that we would be falling below our previously established expectations of building the reserve fund. So we then determined what would be a new line that we'd like to get back on, which is this light blue line up here. And we therefore propose to raise the assessment rates to the current rate of $181 last year and increase it again this year to $200 in order to make sure that we stayed on that path. We've since re-examined that, and based on some better return on investments that we had, basically better projections, we're now looking like we can get onto this green line, which will be fairly similar to the light blue line, and maintain that without having to increase the assessment further to $200. If we use the same assumptions, we'd be on this darker red line way up here. Therefore, to be as consistent as possible with the previous logic, we are recommending that we maintain the assessment at the $181 per residential unit and avoid that additional rate increase. Of course, as we do every year, we'll continue to reevaluate what our expenses are and what our return on investment is. So if we need to make further adjustments in the future, we'll bring that to you. So with that, do you have any questions or comments?
Before we have any questions or comments, I need a point of clarification from the city attorney. Do we have an issue with conflict of interest on the board? Because these areas are where our board members live. I don't remember ever asking this before.
Do we have a board member who is living within the GHAD?
Or within 500 feet, is it? Or, because we might have two, and I don't know.
We had Phil alone before.
Yeah, did he, what did we do?
He voted.
Yeah.
Okay,
he
no,
was
that's
on
why
the
I'm
finance
asking.
committee and they recommended it. So
I'm sorry, Sabina, I missed that. Go ahead.
yeah, I think that rate came from the finance committee earlier as well, and Phil was on that board on the finance committee as well. So
Because
I don't know. I mean, Martin.
So the general rule is that if you're a member of a district or a community that is being affected in a way that's greater than the effect on the general population of that district or community, then it would be considered a conflict. In this case, if you're talking about considering, for example, a rate increase that applies to everyone, and doesn't favor or disfavor that particular voting member disproportionately, then it's not considered to be a conflict of interest.
It's on the record. Let's go then. You're in. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I'm stunned by the fact that we could repair a $5 million problem and proceed almost like it never happened. That and that's the whole reason we have a GHAD. I know it just seems astounding that we could pay $5 million and just keep right on going. But I'm thrilled by the fact that we have a GHAD and we didn't have to do a special assessment or something else to do that repair. And that's why we've got a GHAD.
And I think that probably if we had something even higher than that, we had to do one of these loan in, loan out. But the reality of this, I mean, I go back 30 years on this, 40 years, and it seems like there's always something. I don't think you can go 5 years. I mean, you go back to 82 and 83, I think the whole city got rearranged from those rainstorms when they went through. But
Yep.
that's the point I was trying to make earlier. You know, they start like, hey, we'll do it for $10 million. Or nothing's cheap anymore on this stuff. So you didn't hear me argue past it. I just noticed it was high. Anyone else? I don't have Mark or Sridhar on my screen. So let me get to.
Stop the share.
Okay,
Yeah.
Sridhar, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, Robin, I see that there is a line or item in which you mentioned about heightened fire awareness and fuel abatement. So last year, one of the major concerns that raised by the community is regarding the fire. And we got a lot of calls, and people were so scared. Like at one point, they were thinking of having their hoses ready to prepare ready for because of possible fires, right? So what exactly is this going to help residents? Like how it is going to help with this heightened fire awareness and fuel abatement?
Well, maybe I should recap a little bit about what the GHAD does with regard to that. So the GHAD is the property owner out there and therefore has a responsibility with regard to fire hazard reduction, as with any homeowner, particularly an owner of open space. So we undertake that in a variety of ways. One of those is with the cattle grazing that you see in many of the larger areas. So that's really the biggest element to reduce the fire hazard in the open space is get that fuel grazed down to a low level. Another is that, go ahead.
Sorry, I'll let you finish.
Okay, so another thing that the GHAD undertakes is the annual mowing for fire breaks all around the perimeter of our properties. And then there's some additional maintenance that is done where there's landscape easements that are on GHAD property that are in favor of the city, and the city undertakes maintenance responsibilities and or irrigates those areas to reduce the fire hazard. From time to time, the GHAD sees the need to undertake some additional measures, and those typically mean going into areas where there's heavier planting, such as brush or trees, and we limb the trees up, remove dead material, remove brush that has grown, particularly if it's growing close to homes, next to fences and things like that. So then we undertake additional contracts with our fuel abatement contractor to remove that material.
Okay, so is it possible for us to communicate these actions that we are taking to the community members who live within these GHAD areas, at least close to the GHAD areas? Because a lot of folks were pretty nervous last year. They were like running around, like trying to calling fire districts, and all the Twitter accounts were like keep on people were like just running around to find the info. So it will be nice if we can let them know, hey, these are the actions that will be taken, so that they'll be at least not nervous about this whole fight.
Yes, yes, there's certainly things we can and will do.
Evan Armstrong. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have more, Sridhar?
Yeah, I have one more question. So we are saying like we are going to add monitoring, and so could you please let us know like what kind of monitoring we are talking about, so that like $5 million in one landslide is like, it's a lot of money, right? So what kind of monitoring we are planning, and is there like do we know like practically it is going to help us to avoid these kind of expenses?
Yes, well, there's several kinds of monitoring that we do. One is that we annually hire a consultant, geotechnical and geologic engineering consultants who do a reconnaissance of the entire GHAD property and look for issues that need maintenance. So one of the main things that we can do with the monitoring program is look for problems that are starting to arise and make sure that we're doing appropriate maintenance. For example, making sure that V-ditches are in good repair so that the water is carried away rather than creating a debris slide or something like that. Look for signs that may indicate a landslide. That can be very difficult to actually notice before there's significant movement, but that's one of the things we try to do. Then staff goes out there and looks and does monitoring in a very similar way to our consultant. And then there's various locations where we have some instrumentation in the ground. We put a lot of instrumentation in the ground around the Kami Court landslide. So we will continue to take measurements out there for perpetuity to make sure that we're not getting additional movement, while also making similar measurements wherever we have instrumentation installed.
So we didn't have the similar monitoring in the past. That's why we got into this Kami Court issue?
No, the same measurements and monitoring have occurred. Of course, we didn't have all of that instrumentation there. There's very limited instrumentation in the Dougherty Valley. Typically, you only put it in places where you know you have a problem. So these landslides can often be very subtle, and it's very difficult to see anything until you already have movement, unless you're getting some reports back from residents. So a movement of an inch can be something that is very hard to see, but if you do see it against something like a concrete curb, then you can start asking questions about what's causing that, and it could be caused by something trivial in nature, just some settlement or expansive soils. But if you start seeing indications in larger areas and you look harder and harder, you might find something that is telling you, okay, you have a landslide. Now, once you've seen that kind of movement from a landslide, you've already got the landslide. So you already have to undertake substantial stabilization efforts to stop that movement. What it generally will save you from is damage to homes. So if you act quickly enough, you're still going to have to incur the costs of the landslide repair, but at least the homes have very little impact.
So we may experience the similar landslide again, and possible of.
You could have similar landslides elsewhere, which is why we want to maintain a very healthy reserve.
Okay. So one last question about 181. Is it like increase to the already existing charges, or is it like 181 is what are the current charges that we are like talking about here? Is it an increase or is it like total sum?
This will be the same assessment that was charged last year. So it's not an increase over last year. There was an increase the year before to help offset those costs from Kami Court.
Okay.
So the maximum assessment you can charge is $250 per unit.
Thanks, Robin.
Member Armstrong?
Yeah, thanks, Robin. I understood from your report that we're expecting a reserve fund is going to perform better than previously expected. And that's kind of like you just said. That's why we're maintaining the current levels from 181 to 181. And this is like an annual report, and you've made some assumptions on inflation and return on investment. What happens if inflation is higher, or if our return on investment is not as good? And do we do a mid-year review, or do we just wait until next year and make adjustments as necessary next year for the reserve fund?
We have never done a mid-year change in the assessment. I'm not sure that's actually possible because all of this runs through the property tax bill.
I see.
But of course, we can always reanalyze whenever we like to try and anticipate what our future needs would be. If we experience a period of low return on investment, which we had during the Great Recession, then we start having to look at what kind of path we take in raising our assessments in order to compensate for that. If we had a period of high inflation, we would make a similar adjustment and raise our assessments as necessary. The real key to this analysis isn't whether there's high inflation or not, or whether there's good return on investment. It's the relationship between the two, which we are quite conservative on. And I think we actually have built into this that we're receiving essentially minimal return on investment, net inflation. So the real problem that this GHAD has is that we have that $250 cap on our assessments. And if you ever get to the point where you need to assess above that, you will have to go out to the community under the terms of Proposition 218 and do a community ballot to increase the assessment. So to help overcome that, we want to have this healthy reserve for the function one of dealing with major landslides or other events, and two, acting as a kind of endowment, which will at least receive some reasonable, modest return on investment to help cover inflation.
Okay, all right, thank you. That answers that. I had one other question. It was in the packet, the staff report on page 10. I just didn't quite understand why, when you're looking at there's a chart in there, the current anticipated Valley GHAD revenues and expenditures, and it just shows a change in the number of residential units dropping down. And can you explain that?
Yeah, that's really because we're just based our assumptions on how many units we'll have based on the rate of development in the Dougherty Valley. And that's really just governed by what the developer tells us they'll do versus what they actually do. Okay. So again, we've adjusted based on what we've actually seen in the ground and what we expect them to do to next year in terms of construction.
Okay, thanks, Robin.
Okay, if there's no further comments, do I have a motion to accept the resolution?
I have one quick question
Go ahead.
about
It can't be quick though. No quick questions.
Sylvia.
On this.
So what is Sylvia property area? Which one is that?
That area is, I can share my screen again.
It's on the east side, I think.
Yeah, so it says the GHAD
Against Windermere Parkway.
won't take ownership of that.
Yeah, so that refers to this area here. Hopefully you can all see that.
Yep.
There's no coloration in there. That land is in the Tasahara Valley and is owned by Lennar Homes. At this time, there is no plans to take ownership of any of that land.
Got it. Thank you.
Cool.
That was quick.
Okay. Do we have a volunteer to move to accept the resolution? We have Sridhar Varos.
I'll
I
second.
get
A motion for Sridhar to approve the fiscal year 2021-22 engineer report, updated reserve fund study, adopting a resolution. That's the one you just heard, and setting the public hearing for May 25th, correct? So we had a motion, Varos, and a second, Zephyr, and now she got in ahead of you.
Okay.
And a roll call vote, please.
Board Member Armstrong,
Yes.
Board Member Varos,
Yes.
Board Member Zafar,
aye.
Vice Chair Perkins,
Yes.
and Chair Hudson.
Yes, that'd be 5-0. That'd be
Yes.
5-0. We are adjourned to the next meeting of the Dougherty Valley Geologic Hazard Abatement District Board, which will be scheduled by the board chair at a date and time to be determined. Our next meeting will be at 7 o'clock for the regular meeting. See you there.